studio, Dustin.
Yeah, thanks for hosting.
Thanks
for coming over.
Yeah. Where is your building? Can you just tell us a little bit about where you're located and what type of artists are working in the building?
Yeah, we're in a small building in Bushwick. It's by Flushing and Broadway, so it's kind of where Bed-Stuy and Bushwick and Williamsburg all meet here. And this building just opened about 2 years ago. So when we were looking at the building, me and the people that I was previously sharing a studio with all moved in. When we were looking, they were still like things. So and when we started, dirt floor and contractors' tools all over the place. So they basically said, tell us where you want the walls, and we'll put in a door and build it. So there were already people working in the building who had like design and architecture offices. So it's a mix of some painters. There's actually a lot of kilns. There's a lot of electricity here. So there's a lot of clay people in the building. Architects, designers, painters, so some like kind of technology artists sort of folks, and I think there's some jewelers upstairs too. But it's a relatively small building, so I think there's probably 25 or 30 studios, but probably like 40 individuals who are actually ever here in the building.
Okay.
And then who do you share your actual, because I've been over there and you have like a nice little space that do you share with one person or two other people?
I share with 3 other people. I sublet part of my space to 3 other people, and we can, you know, I mean, tell me when you want to like tour and walk around and things too. When it's, yeah. So maybe it's time.
Yeah, now's a good time to like get a lay of the land.
Okay, so we'll just peek in the hallway here. So here's like our little ancient staircase and sink and closet and bathroom. And then my studio is split into this left half where Vicky and Annie work, and they have a soft goods design company called Lifewife, and then they each do some individual work. And there's another ceramic artist back here, Laura O'Connor, who has just a little bit of work she does. She takes like.
So Dustin, the video looks pretty good, but can you?
And then on this.
Can you pan just a little bit slower?
Oh yeah, sorry. This side is my half then. So the kilns are over here. Vicky owns a small kiln and I have a little bit larger kiln. And then my space. When I moved in, I had half of this space because I was really worried about paying the rent. I said I needed to be able to grow and progress around and work on a little bit bigger things. So last year I doubled my space so that I took this other half and I built an extra table. So I have lots more room to spread out now. So and over here is my wheel. Try to walk slowly on this end. So I'm over here a lot, and then this is my main work table for doing wet kinds of things. And I built these shelves when I moved in that hold everything that's works in progress. So my trimming tools, my little buckets of slip and throwing water. In the center section is where I kind of slot in boards of pots that are either drying or are wrapped and waiting to be trimmed. And then on the far side is kind of like crap storage, glaze tests, materials all live over here.
So
very nice.
It looks like you have a bunch of work in progress right now, Dustin. Do you?
I have a few pots on the table.
And then, so how do you, like when you're making work, do you like sit down and throw a bunch of stuff and then like follow it all the way through, or you sort of always like, because it looks like there's some stuff on the shelves behind you too.
I kind of work per kiln load. I don't have a lot of space to have things sitting if they aren't about to turn into money. So I kind of throw in the kiln and know, they're going in next Thursday, so that I can kind of time myself. When do I have to trim things? When do I have to put handles on things? Today I'm going to decorate all of these in bisque tonight. And there's always a little bit of overflow from that. And then while these would be firing and glazing, I would have the next batch going wet as well. So the kiln loads overlap a little bit, but it's pretty regimented. When can I fire this? What else do I have over here? Okay. Then there's like reclaim zones. So I have one little plaster slab, and I keep trimmings in a bowl of reclaim going underneath this table. I used to try to keep a white reclaim going and a pink, but I just kept running out of pink too much. So almost everything gets tinted pink. And then there's underglazes that are colorful up here. And then I hang my bubble wrap from the ceiling, which I'm really happy with. That keeps it really easy to use and completely out of the way.
Nice. Yeah. Very, very organized setup.
Here's soft chair. And then this side is where finished work lives. So it kind of gets grouped by what each pot says. I do a lot of text-based things. So they're grouped by that onto each shelf. All right, here's the long fox. They live up here. These all say, fuck this. They live on here. And it gets more and less disorganized. Right now I have some things set aside for orders that are going to ship out next week. And this new still kind of growing and developing all over the place. It's not a lot of really consistent forms just yet. So there's more of it there, and there's more variety in what it says. That keeps it more disorganized too. And then I have space on top for taller, funner, more experimental, less kind of production pottery sorts of things up here.
So Dustin, you and I met, and we've got a delivery guest is gonna get. Dustin, you and I met in Minneapolis, like 6-7 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
And you were working at Northern Clay, and I was a student at the University of Minnesota. What has moving here changed the way that you make work, or like what you're doing in the studio?
It's so really, really slow. I feel like when we met in Minneapolis, I was working full-time in Northern Clay Center in like a pretty heavy admin role there. And then I would walk to the other side of the building where I had my studio.
Yeah.
And so I think I really shut off a lot of parts of my brain. I didn't like Minneapolis very much. I love the Clay Center and I love the job, but Minneapolis was a struggle for me. So I think that because my business was starting to grow, this production line was starting to grow there, I didn't have a lot of time to experiment and try a lot of other things. I think, I started some decal collage work there and some drawings on plates, but I would typically just make that work when it was for an exhibition, which I guess I still mostly do. But it's really been in the last year that I've felt like I have space in my head to be creative again and to try to build up some of those skills that just got so sucked into production work. So it's coming slowly, but it's very slow.
Yeah. Since like knowing you and like the way that you've set things up here, it seems like you've always been like pretty serious about how you set aside your studio time versus your like work or teaching time. outside of the studio, are how many hours do you like usually spend in the studio versus working or teaching? And is most of your outside work as a ceramics instructor?
Yeah, everything I do is clay. So I teach 4 classes altogether in 3 different studios. And then I try to be in the studio like 25 or 30 hours a week. And
Yeah.
here's a new thing that I'm just trying this year. It's called a weekend.
Yeah.
And what happens is you take 2 days off and they're side by side. So you get 2 in a row where you don't have to work. And it's actually, it's really good for my mental health. So can't recommend that enough. If you're if you're competitive, you could try to take like 8 months off in a row, like we're all doing now.
Yeah.
I try to be organized and regimented about how I spend my time, I guess. I moved here 3.5 years and wasn't sure I would sign and just not know. And I was applying for some full-time jobs and I was teaching a little bit, and then the teaching sort of grew and it worked out that I could have a studio at a community studio. And then I moved into a shared space closer to my home. And then I moved here, like I said, 2 years being part of that. So for a while, I think I was teaching 3 or 4 classes and doing a part-time job 20 hours a week, and then trying to do my studio work on top of that. And just realized that if my production, if my creative practice was going to grow, I'd be able to dedicate more time to it, a lot more time to it. So that's kind of how I've balanced now into having teaching and studio, and now more time evenings and weekends to not think about work.
Yeah. Okay, so I got a question in the chat. How much of your business is selling your work, and has that been growing? Like I've seen your work in like more of like a sculptural exhibition context, but then I also know like, and probably a lot of people know your pots first and foremost. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, all of my business is selling the pots. Most of it is, I like to do wholesale a lot more than retail shows or direct sales. Just because I prefer to get them out of my studio, and people are better, I think, at selling them to customers than I am. I do shows here in the summer, but I don't, and for holiday, but most of my work goes out to wholesale boutiques in different cities. And then a little bit that's sold on Instagram or through my website or something like that. And right, so I still do these sculptural pieces sometimes, and I've kind of pulled some out here if we want to look at them too.
That'd be awesome.
And in addition to the pottery, but I think it has to be pretty separate. And it's separate in my head too, of like what is more conceptual and what is more commercial production pottery. Has to be able to sell at a certain price. I've really liked in the other studio visits you've done, seeing like what people have that's fresh, that's work in progress stuff. I don't have as much of that like exciting things going on. So here's, I drew this large, go ahead, Anders.
Oh, I was just gonna, like, these ones are great. I think like most of what I see, and probably a lot of people at Brooklyn Clay see, are like most of the like smaller utilitarian pots. So these ones are, I think, will be super interesting to see. And some people might be familiar with like your decal and like surface process, but yeah, if you could talk through that a little bit too, that would be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to pull out a couple smaller things too, because then some of them, there's a little bit of overlap. functional pottery that most people might be most familiar with, the puck cups,
Mm-hmm.
are pretty like set, right? There's a lot of it going on with that. To have different phrases, I do a lot of things that are text-based, but have learned a lot that this kind of cup, like they all have a little bit different voice. You can't say the same thing on this that you can on something like this, because this visual communication, right? The style of the text and the background and the line quality of the letters says so much about a thing. So when I started to want to say different things, it had to have a little bit different background. And this is some of the creative time that I've been able to spend and experiment a little bit this year in working with the colorful background, but then what are the phrases that work? What are the styles for the letters? How do I build some depth to this colorful surface?
Yeah, what's the process on a piece like that?
I do all of my decorating wet and leather hard. So a piece like this would be painted while it is hard leather hard or bone dry. And then I will cover on top of that underglaze painting with the wax resist.
Mm-hmm.
And then scratch with a needle tool the drawings through the wax resist. So I get a kind of a chunky jagged line, and then go back and fill that line with a black wash, all
Mm-hmm.
before it goes into the bisque. So I get out of red from that process, like I like to leave this top part brushed with the wax so that it kind of edge a little. Where I wipe things off, sometimes that black wash stays a little bit and puts kind of a surface shadow sort of mark. I think that adds a lot too. Okay, these sculptural pieces that use the decals. I used to do pieces that just had the decals, right? That had a lot of decals to build out that entire surface just with imagery, but that's really expensive to cover everything with decals. So I've been working more to involve the colors and the painting into those compositions as well. I don't know, I think I still end up adding a lot more decals. But I think this is where the experimentation with that color sort of grew and developed, because I'd been working in black and white for so long. So something like this thick pink slip with black wash rubbed on top of it, it's like, oh, I can do surfaces like that. Okay.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Dustin, when you're working on these pieces, do you have a plan when you're making them and then applying colored slip to the surfaces, right? And then firing them?
Yes.
And then decals, and then they get fired again. Like, how much of a plan do you
Yes.
have when you're working with the wet clay, as far as like, do you have ideas for what the decals are going to be, or like even specific placements for them?
A tiny baby of a plan. Usually these pieces start, if I have somewhere to show them, right? It has to be for something and it's on a timeline. So that kind of directs some of the imagery that I'm going to use to pull things from contemporary issues. And then I can start to chunk in, like, what are going to be my main images for this particular piece? What are some images that are on related themes to that? And then I don't know if I think a whole lot about the composition the composition of the decals while I'm building the piece. But once I start painting, I think, okay, I'm going to need a big, mostly or background 5 inches tall. So I think I plan in where some of those main images go a little bit, but then a lot of things can kind of fill in visually around that. And the compositions typically start with, I'm trying to think if I have another one here. The compositions typically start with that main theme, right? This is about the past and a lot of things. So there, I think of it as primary, secondary, and tertiary kind of issues that are happening at any given time.
And do you have is there a matte glaze on the outside, or is there no glaze on the outside?
Most of my work is not glazed on the outside.
Uh-huh. And is everything that we're looking at, is it, are you mid-range and this is all porcelain, it looks like?
Yeah, I was just, I got into working in porcelain at Cone 10 reduction, which was great, but there's no way I could get these colors there. And I really like porcelain. I like the white background. It lets me do a lot of drawing things.
Uh-huh.
But I wasn't prepared to go to Cone 6 porcelain. It's too yellowish for me. And I think that's too, I feel super, I don't know, nerdy, dopey, elitist saying like, don't do mid-range porcelain. And when I hold them next to each other, I don't know if I can really tell, but something about me, it's just like, part of me can tell just enough.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to have to try to make my slips and glazes and everything go down to Cone 6. So when I started here, I thought that's fine. I'll start at Cone 10 in oxidation in the electric kiln. And then next month, I'll go to Cone 6. Like I'll do some research on Cone 6 porcelains. I'm sure I can find one that I like. And then just never did. Yeah. That second step. So yeah. I've been firing Cone 10 oxidation and finding it to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything is polished when it comes out of the kiln. So I think that helps it to feel finished when you're handling it and when you're using it on your lips too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely like a toothiness that can be there at Cone 6. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So what you mentioned that those like larger pieces you usually only make if they're going somewhere specific. Are those ones for show, or are they going somewhere that you're getting ready for?
But I do have some new drawings that just came out of the kiln that no one has seen. So I thought I might show you today.
Yeah.
But okay, well, we have to build up to it. Do we? Here's plates on a wall. Oh, here's one of the first plates on a wall I ever did. The Call Me plate that's got a Mishima drawing of my hand telephone and my cell phone number. And then it's got gold luster drawings of my grandma's crescent rolls that I've never successfully baked. And then there was a series of butt licking plates too. That was 2007, 8, 9, maybe?
Okay.
Yeah, probably 2008 or 2009. And I did a series of flower pots that were similar to this. And now when I look back at them, I think this was the beginning of the collage aesthetic, right? But I didn't have the tools and the technology beyond a Mishima drawing and a gold luster drawing to start to layer and use the opacity that I do with actual images now. So there were pieces I'd made that I was drawing keyboards and polar bears and alligators and all of this other stuff, but just as, I don't know, just as drawings. Maybe it doesn't sound so much like collage when I talk about it like that, but I think that is really where the seeds of the decal work were. So there were these erotic plates that followed on that are Mishima drawings with gold luster. And then like we did earlier last year, I guess, the meme decal composition plates from your decal printer there at BKLYN Clay.
So Anders and I like have both known about your work for a while. And I think you two may have talked about like meeting in Minnesota, but one thing early on was like your work in a ceramics gallery really felt like pretty radical. And I don't like, do you still feel like, I mean, maybe that was just something that I was seeing coming from like Montana and like a real ceramic background, but have you noticed like any change in that, or like how people, because it must have been wild when people walked into Northern Clay Center and then came across those plates early on.
Yeah, the stark difference between seeing like a Warren McKenzie pot and then a butt licking plate is it's pretty apparent.
Well, I've been so nervous for so long, even here when I do like a craft fair in Brooklyn, like, can I show that? That's kind of a family based event. I have learned a lot in the last 10 years, I think. Well, I had a big chip on my shoulders. I probably still do in a lot of ways. I think from learning about pottery in Minnesota, that's such a functional brown reduction Shino traditional atmosphere that I wasn't explicitly taught that, right? My sculptor went to grad school in LA, right? My teacher in undergrad. But that style of Shino work is just so in the water that you can't get out of it.
Yeah.
And then, and being around that kind of work so heavily at Northern Clay Center, right? They represent 60 artists in the exhibition gallery, and they're very, half of them are probably from the region. It's a very, very high pottery world. So I think when I finished grad school in Minnesota, I'm thinking, is ceramics big enough to hold this, right? What's the ceramics world going to do with this? And the ceramics world was like, yeah, that's fine, whatever. Like, it's a drawing, it's not a big rebel in some ways, but it's been erotic and confrontational and obscene work in clay and any other material for a long time. So, and now I feel like it's so tame when I look at what queer ceramics is now, and all of the queer folks who are coming out of grad school now, who are doing video work and performance work and body work and combining clay and other materials in such wild ways. I feel like stagnant with this work in some ways. But it's a little bit different approach too, so not everything has to be cross-dressing. But I just made these that I'm excited about.
Nice.
That are like large-ish kind of plate bowl sorts of forms that just has a Mishima drawing. Backgrounds, I'm curious in making them not white. So this is just some marbleized pink and white porcelains. And this guy he was posing outside. I was like, how do I give this some kind of context? It would look so, I think, bare, pardon the pun, on just a white background. So played a little bit with, I don't usually paint representational sorts of things, so to try to make bushes and a sky come out was really a test.
Yeah,
That's
that
really nice.
background is pretty amazing.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I'm excited. I think they maybe need a little bit of gold luster. I think they need one more layer of stuff, but they're coming along.
Yeah, those look great.
Jen wrote in and asked if like what potters or artists like really inspire you, or maybe it'd be a good time to just like name drop some people that you just like too, even if you're not necessarily much from them.
I have such a bad time with my memory, right? I have to like, I don't have a list of people. I think that like Kathy King was a big early influence, who's a porcelain potter. She's at Harvard now, who has made autobiographical work, since the 90s. It's kind of issue-based and image-based, and there's some text in that. So seeing her work was really powerful to me. Carrie Leibowitz is an artist I really like, who's been a painter and does some stuff. I'm just such a sucker for like color field modernist dudes that I feel so guilty that they're all just white guys. But Cy Twombly and de Kooning, and I always look at the like Franz Kleins and the Robert Motherwells. It's just black swishes. I think, more black swishes. Okay, but Joan Mitchell's thing. I'm seeing so much more about her now, and I'm just totally in love with that work.
I don't know who that is. Who? Joe Mitchell?
Joan Mitchell was a color field painter in the 60s and 70s, maybe, who was American but ended up working in Paris.
Okay.
And she has like a four panel painting that's up at the Met right now. It's beautiful, beautiful.
Cool.
Okay, who else though? Yeah, I guess I should think about.
Dustin, I'm sorry, I'm gonna. I was looking at this work today, and it was like for the first time I like really saw Grayson Perry and your Beth's.
Oh right, yeah.
Doing sort of this narrative collage thing too.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And now I'm gonna.
And then I really like I like some brown pottery too, just to use and have around. And I think some of the things that I color field painting is kind of like, Japanese Shino sort of stuff in a lot of ways, and old Korean pots that have that depth to them that is harder to reach without a gas kiln. But maybe that's what I like about some of this residue of the black slip on top of things too, that can make shadows.
Have you ever made a Shino teapot? Have you ever put a bamboo handle on a teapot?
I've never put a bamboo handle on a teapot. I think I've made some in class and said, and this is where the bamboo handle goes. But
yeah, that's as far as I've ever gotten.
I feel like a nice homage to Minnesota could be some like a brown erotic teapot with the bamboo handle.
I have wanted to dip one in just brown house paint. I think would be acceptable.
That sounds nice.
All right. Well, if anybody has any last questions, feel free to unmute yourself and just ask us.
Yeah, please.
Are you in the studio the rest of the day?
A bit of the rest of the day. I need to decorate most of these things and get them in a bisque, and I'm going to do some of this color process. Another thing that happened in Minneapolis is that I kind of unconsciously developed work that has to be very fast to decorate, right? Because I didn't want to spend any more time in the studio. So they're fast to decorate, and now when I have to spend more than 30 seconds decorating something, I'm like, my life is dragging on. This cannot happen.
Yeah.
You can't pay me enough for this now. So I do it in batches and it works out.
Yeah.
I have a few of those to do today. And I think some of that stuff I need to videotape for other teaching demos that are going online too.
Cool. That'd be awesome.
Nice.
Well, I hope you can like set aside some time to painfully work on imagery and get more of those plates done with the background.
Yeah.
They're so nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great.
Well, thanks for having us, Dustin, and
Yeah.
thanks everyone for joining. Yeah, like Dustin mentioned, he's
Well, you know, more in
Oh.
sorry. It cut out for just a second.
Hi, Dustin.
Oh, I lost Anders for a second. Go.
Okay.
I didn't
Okay,
see.
we thought we lost you. Yeah, so we'll work on getting some demos on some processes that you use on those pots that we've all just seen. Yeah. And thanks again for having us.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Dustin.
Thanks, Dustin. Stay safe.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you.